Chapter 7 of the Time Traders by Andre Norton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Time Traders. Chapter 7. Ross whirled the rope which had been meant to bring him down around Lal. He lashed the tribesman's arms tight to his body before he knelt to cut loose his fellow time-traveler. Lal now huddled against the far wall of the cup, fear in every line of his small body. So apparent was this fear that Ross felt no satisfaction at turning the tables on him. Instead, he felt increasingly uneasy. "What is this all about?" he asked McNeil as he stripped off his bonds and helped him up. McNeil massaged his wrists, took a step or two, and grimaced with pain. "Our friend seeks to be an obedient servant of Lurga." Ross picked up his bow. "The tribe is out to hunt us?" "Lurga has ordered, out of thin air again, that any traders who escaped are to be brought in and introduced to him personally at the sacrifice for the enrichment of the fields." The old gift of blood and life at the spring sowing. Ross recalled grisly details from his cram lessons. Any wandering stranger or enemy tribesman taken in a raid before that day would meet such a fate. On unlucky years, when people were not available, a deer or wolf might serve. But the best sacrifice of all was a man. So Lurga had decreed, from the air, that traitors were his meat? What of Ash? Let any hunter from the village track him down. "We have to move fast," Ross told McNeil as he took up the rope which made a leading cord for Lal. Ash would want to question the tribesman about this second order from Lurga. Impatient as Ross was, he had to mend his pace to accommodate McNeil. The man from the hill post was close to the end of his strength. He had started off bravely enough, but now he wavered. Ross sent Lal ahead with a sharp push, ordering him to stay there, while he went to McNeil's aid. It was well into the afternoon before they came up the stream and saw the fire before the cave. "Makna!" Ash hailed Ross's companion with the native version of his name. "And Lal. But what do you do here, Lal of Nodrin's town?" "Mischief." Ross helped McNeil within the cave and to the pile of brush which was his own bed. "He was hunting traders as a present for Lurga." "So," Ash turned upon the tribesman, "and by whose word do you go hunting my kinsman, Lal? Was it Nodrin's? Has he forgotten the blood bond between us? For it was in the name of Lurga himself that bond was made." "Oh!" The tribesman squatted down against the wall where Ross had shoved him. Unable to hide his head in his arms, he brought his face down upon his knees so that only his shaggy topknot of hair was exposed. Ross realized, with stupefaction, that the little man was crying like a child, his hunched shoulders rising and falling with the force of his sobs. He wailed. Ash allowed him a moment or two of noisy grief and then limped over to grasp his topknot and pull up his head. Lal's eyes were screwed tightly shut, but there were tears on his cheeks, and his mouth twisted in another wail. "Be quiet." Ash shook him, but not too harshly. "Have you yet felt the bite of my sharp knife? Has an arrow holed your skin? You are alive, and you could be dead. Show that you are glad you live and continue to breathe by telling us what you know, Lal." The woman Casca had displayed a measure of intelligence and ease at their meeting upon the road, but it was very plain that Lal was of different stuff, a simple man in whose head few ideas could find house-room at one time. And to him the present was all black. Little by little they dragged the story out of him. Lal was poor, so poor that he had never dared dream of owning for himself some of the precious things the hill traders displayed to the wealthy of Nodrin's town. But he was also a follower of the Great Mothers, rather than one who made sacrifices to Lurga. Lurga was the god for warriors and great men. He was too high to concern himself with such as Lal. So when Nodrin reported the end of the hill post under the storm fist of Lurga, Lal had been impressed only to a point. He was still convinced it was none of his concern, and instead he began thinking of the treasures which might lie hidden in the destroyed buildings. It occurred to him that Lurga's wrath had been laid upon the men who had owned them, but perhaps it would not stretch to the fine things themselves. So he had gone secretly to the hill to explore. What he had seen there had utterly converted him to a belief in the fury of Lurga, and he had been frightened out of his simple wits, fleeing without making the search he had intended. But Lurga had seen him there, had read his impious thoughts. At that point, Ash interrupted the stream of Lal's story. How had Lurga seen Lal? Because, Lal shuddered, began to cry again, and spoke the next few sentences haltingly, that very morning, when he had gone out to hunt wild fowl in the marshes, Lurga had spoken to him, to Lal, who was less than a flea creeping upon a worn-out fur rug. And how had Lurga spoken? Ash's voice was softer, gentle. Out of the air, even as he had spoken to Nodrin, who was a chief. He said that he had seen Lal in the hill post, and so Lal was his meat. But not yet would he eat him, not if Lal served him in other ways. And he, Lal, had lain flat on the ground before the bodiless voice of Lurga, and had sworn he would serve Lurga to the end of his life. Then Lurga had told him to hunt down one of the evil traders who was hiding in the marshes, and bind him with ropes. Then he was to call the men of the village, and together they would carry the prisoner to the hill where Lurga had loosed his wrath, and there they would leave him. Later they might return and take what they found there, and use it to bless the fields at sowing time, and all would be well with Nodrin's village. And Lal had sworn that he would do as Lurga bade, but now he could not. So Lurga would eat him up. He was a man without hope. Yet, Ash said even more gently, have you not served the Great Mother all these years, giving to her a portion of the first fruits, even when the yield of your one field was small? Lal stared at him, his woe-begone face still smeared with tears. It took a second or two for the question to penetrate his fear-clouded mind. Then he nodded timidly. Has she not dealt with you well in return, Lal? You are a poor man, that is true, but you are not gaunt of belly, even though this is the thin season, when men fast before the coming of the new harvest. The Great Mother watches over her own, and it is she who has brought you to us now. For this I say to you, Lal, and I, Asha of the Traders, speak with a straight tongue. The Lurga who struck our post, who spoke to you from the air, means you no good." "Oh!" wailed Lal. "So I do know Asha. He is of the blackness, and the wandering spirits of the dark." "Just so. Thus he is no kin to the mother, for she is of the light and of good things, of the new grain, and the newborn lambs for your flocks, of the maids who wed with men and bring forth sons to lift their fathers' spears, daughters to spin by the hearth and sow the yellow grain in the furrows. Lurga's quarrel lies with us, Lal, not with Nodrin, nor with you. And we take upon us that quarrel." He limped into the outer air, where the shadows of the evening were beginning to creep across the ground. "Hear me, Lurga," he called into the coming night. "I am Asha of the Traders, and upon myself I take your hate. Not upon Lal, nor upon Nodrin, nor upon the people who live in Nodrin's town shall your wrath lie. Thus do I say it." Ross, noticing that Ash concealed from Lal a wave of his hand, was prepared for some display meant to impress the tribesmen. It came in a spectacular burst of green fire beyond the stream. Lal wailed again, but when that fire was followed by no other manifestation, he ventured to raise his head once more. "You have seen how Lurga answered me, Lal. Toward me only will his wrath be turned. Now—" Ash limped back and dragged out the white wolf-skin, dropping it before Lal. "This you will give to Casca that she may make a curtain for the mother's home. See, it is white, and so rare that the mother will be pleased with such a fine gift. And you will tell her all that has chanced, and how you believe in her powers over the powers of Lurga, and the mother will be well pleased with you. But you shall say nothing to the men of the village, for this quarrel is between Lurga and Asha now, and not for the meddling of others." He unfastened the rope which bound Lal's arms. Lal reached out a hand to the wolf-skin, his eyes filled with wonderment. "This is a fine thing you give me, Asha, and the mother will be pleased, for in many years she has not had such a curtain for her secret place. Also, I am but a little man. The quarrels of great ones are not for me. Since Lurga has accepted your words, this is none of my affair. Yet I will not go back to the village for a while, with your permission, Asha, for I am a man of loose and wagging tongue, and oftentimes I speak what I do not really wish to say, so if I am asked questions, I answer. If I am not there to be asked such questions, I cannot answer." McNeil laughed, and Ash smiled. "Well enough, Lal. Perhaps you are a wiser man than you think. But also, I do not believe you should stay here." The tribesman was already nodding. "That do I say too, Asha. You are now facing the wrath of Lurga, and with that I wish no part. Thus I shall go into the marsh for a while. There are birds and hares to hunt, and I shall work upon this fine skin, so that when I take it to the mother it shall indeed be a gift worth her smiles. Now, Asha, I would go before the night comes, if it pleases you." "Go with good fortune, Lal." Ash stood apart while the tribesman ducked his head in a shy, awkward farewell to the others, pattering out into the valley. "What if they pick him up?" McNeil asked wearily. "I don't think they can," Ash returned. "And what would you do, keep him here? If we tried that, he'd scheme to escape and try to turn the tables on us. Now he'll keep away from Nodrin's village, and out of sight for the time being. Lal's not too bright in some ways, but he's a good hunter. If he has reason for hiding out, it'll take a better hunter to track him. At least we know now that the Reds are afraid they did not make a clean sweep here. What happened, McNeil?" While he was telling his story in more detail, both Ash and Ross worked on his burns, making him comfortable. Then Ash sat back as Ross prepared food. "How did they spot the post?" Ash rubbed his chin and frowned at the fire. "Only way I can guess is that they picked up our post signal and pinpointed the source. That means they must have been hunting us for some time." "No strangers about lately?" McNeil shook his head. "Our cover wasn't broken that way. Sanford was a wonder. If I hadn't known better, I would have sworn he was born one of the Beaker folk. He had a network of informants running all the way from here into Brittany. Amazing how he was able to work without arousing any suspicions. I suppose his being a member of the Smiths Guild was a big help. He could pick up a lot of news from any village where there was one at work. And I tell you," McNeil propped himself up on his elbow to exclaim more vehemently, "there wasn't a whisper of trouble from here clear across the Channel and pretty far to the north. We were already sure the South was clean before we ever took cover as Beakers, especially since their clans are thick in Spain." Ash chewed a broiled wing reflectively. "Their permanent base with the transport has to be somewhere within the bounds of the territory they hold in our own time." "They could plant it in Siberia and laugh at us," McNeil exploded. "No hope of our getting in there." "No." Ash threw the stripped bone into the fire and licked grease from his fingers. Then they would be faced with the old problem of distance. If what they are exploiting lay within their modern boundaries, we would never have tumbled to the thing in the first place. What the Reds want must lie outside their 20th century holdings. A slender point in our favor. Therefore, they will plant their shift point as close to it as they can. Our transportation problem is more difficult than theirs will ever be. You know why we chose the Arctic for our base. It lies in a section of the world never populated by other than roving hunters. But I'll wager anything you want to name that their point is somewhere in Europe, where they have people to contend with. If they are using a plane, they can't risk its being seen. "I don't see why not," Ross broke in. "These people couldn't possibly know what it was. Lurga's bird, magic—" Ash shook his head. "They must have the interference with history worry as much as we have. Anything of our own time has to be hidden or disguised in such a way that the native who may stumble upon it will never know it was man-made. Our sub is a whale to all appearances. Possibly their plane is a bird, but neither can bear too close an examination. We don't know what could result from a leak of real knowledge in this or any primitive time, how it might change history." "But—" Ross advanced what he believed to be the best argument against that reasoning. "Suppose I handed Lal a gun and taught him to use it. He couldn't duplicate the weapon. The technology required lies so far beyond this age. These people couldn't reproduce such a thing." "True enough. On the other hand, don't belittle the ingenuity of the Smiths, or the native intelligence of men in any era. These tribesmen might not be able to reproduce your gun, but it would set them thinking along new lines. We might find that they would think our time right out of being. No, we dare not play tricks with the past. This is the same situation we faced immediately after the discovery of the atom bomb. Everybody raced to produce that new weapon, and then sat around and shivered for fear we'd be crazy enough to use it on each other. The Reds have made new discoveries which we have to match, or we will go under. But back in time, we have to be careful, both of us, or perhaps destroy the world we do live in." "What do we do now?" McNeil wanted to know. "Murdoch and I came here only for a trial run. It's his test. The sub is to call for us about 9 days from now. So if we sit tight, if we can sit tight," McNeil lay down again, "they will take us out. Meanwhile, we have 9 days." They spent 3 more days in the cave. McNeil was on his feet and impatient to leave before Ash was able to hobble well enough to travel. Though Ross and McNeil took turns at hunting and guard duty, they saw no signs that the tribesmen were tracking them. Apparently, Lal had done as he promised, withdrawing to the marsh and hiding there apart from his people. In the gray of pre-dawn on the 4th day, Ash wakened Ross. Their fire had been buried with earth, and already the cave seemed bleak. They ate venison roasted the night before and went out into the chill of a fog. A little way down the valley, McNeil joined them out of the mist from his guard post. Keeping their pace to one which favored Ash's healing wound, they made their way inland in the direction of the track linking the villages. Crossing that road they continued northward, the land beginning to rise under them. Far away they heard the blatting of sheep, the bark of a dog. In the fog, Ross stumbled in a shallow ditch, beyond which lay a stubbled field. Ash paused to look about him, his nostrils expanding as if he were a hound smelling out their trail. The 3 went on, crossing a whole series of small, irregular fields. Ross was sure that the yield from any of these cleared strips must be scanty. The fog was thickening. Ash pressed the pace, using his handmade crutch carefully. He gave an audible sigh of relief when they were faced at last by 2 stone monoliths rising like pillars. A 3rd stone lay across them, forming a rude arch through which they saw a narrow valley running back into the hills. Through the fog, Ross could sense the eerie strangeness of the valley beyond the massive gate. He would have said that he was not superstitious, that he had merely studied these tribal beliefs as lessons. He had not accepted them. Yet now, if he had been alone, he would have avoided that place and turned aside from the valley, for that which waited within was not for him. To his secret relief, Ash paused by the arch to wait. The older man gestured the other two into cover. Ross obeyed willingly, though the dank drops of condensing fog dripped on his cloak and wet his face as he brushed against prickly-leafed shrubs. Here were walls of evergreen plants and dwarfed pines, almost as if this tunnel of year-round greenery had been planted with some purpose in mind. Once his companions had concealed themselves, Ash called, shrill but sweetly, with a bird's rising notes. 3 times he made that sound before a figure moved in the fog, the rough gray-white of its long cloak melting in the wisps of mist. Down that green tunnel, out of the heart of the valley, the other came, a loop of cloak concealing the entire figure. It halted right in back of the arch, and Ash, making a gesture to the others to stay where they were, faced the muffled stranger. "Hands and feet of the Mother, she who sows what may be reaped. Outland stranger, who is under the wrath of Lurga," the other mocked him in the voice of Casca. "What do you want, Outlander, that you dare to come here where no man may enter?" "That which you know. For on the night when Lurga came, you also saw." Ross heard the hiss of a sharply drawn breath. "How knew you that, Outlander?" "Because you serve the Mother, and you are jealous for her and her service. If Lurga is a mighty god, you wanted to see his acts with your own eyes." When she finally answered, there was anger as well as frustration in her voice. "And you know of my shame then, Asha. For Lurga came. On a bird he came, and he did even as he said he would. So now the village will make offerings to Lurga and beg his favor, and the Mother will no more have those to hearken to her words and offer her first fruits. But from whence came this bird, which was Lurga? Can you tell me that, she who waits upon the Mother? What difference does it make from what direction Lurga came? That does not add nor take from his power." Casca moved beneath the arch. "Or does it in some strange way, Asha?" "Perhaps it does. Only tell me." She turned slowly and pointed over her right shoulder. "From that way he came, Asha. Well did I watch, knowing that I was the Mother's and that even Lurga's thunderbolts could not eat me up. Does knowing that make Lurga smaller in your eyes, Asha? When he has eaten up all that is yours and your kin with it?" "Perhaps," Asha repeated. "I do not think Lurga will come so again." She shrugged, and the heavy cloak flapped. "That shall be as it shall be, Asha. Now go, for it is not good that any man come hither." Casca paced back into the heart of the green tunnel, and Ross and McNeil came out of concealment. McNeil faced in the direction she had pointed. "Northeast," he commented thoughtfully. "The Baltic lies in that quarter." End of Chapter 7.